Rebel. Reject. Create.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you happen to be in the world, and welcome back to Rebel, Reject, Create podcasts. And today, my guest is Mr. Sean Hayes, who's enjoyed an award-winning career in advertising, spanning 40 years and 5 countries. Now he's been promoted to a stay-at-home remote worker, where his duties include, in between writing conceptual copy for clients, collecting Amazon deliveries for his wife and kids, and being the official door opener and closer for the Camely cat, O'Brien. So, Sean's living the dream. Welcome, sir, to Rebel, Reject, Create.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Great. Now, as an advertising industry creative type, do you believe that AI is creative in the same way that someone in an agency is?
Well, I wish I had a simple answer to that. Is the thing about creativity? We have to define what creativity is, first of all, because there's many definitions for many people across many industries. So I'll come at it from the communications industry point of view. Is that for me, creativity is about creating surprise. So because if you don't create surprise, you don't get attention. If you don't get attention, everything else is academic, you know. So the thing is, look, when the digital ethos came in, it sort of changed that definition of what creativity was. It was a process. It was sort of a building apps that sort of had conversations around brands, etc. The dynamic changed. So we can only talk about AI in the context of what's happened in the last 10, 20 years, because I'm old school, from the traditional part of advertising, where it was very much a thinking job. You know, you sat down with a writer and a strategist and worked out about solving business problems. But the digital ethos changed the dynamics of that completely. So it became automated to a certain extent. So AI's impact on creativity will be the people who got into the industry through automation have the most to fear. But people who genuinely are creative thinkers, actually, their star will begin to rise again.
Because someone's got to use the tool, right?
Well, I mean, I love the tools. I mean, I've always liked that. I just jump into the deep end and sort of play around. It's like you take a pencil, right? And you could draw like Da Vinci or Michelangelo, and some other person picks up the same pencil and is difficultly drawing matchstick men. So that's the analogy I would use, is that nothing fundamentally changes for creative people in the communication industry. Now, you could broaden this sort of debate about, you know, what about the illustrators? What about the photographers? What about all the sundry services? I wouldn't like to be in those industries today, to be quite honest. Let's lay it on the table, in the sense that the problem with AI is, like, it tends to be good enough. And the industry is very interested in good enough, because it's exchanged efficacy for efficiencies, financial efficiencies. You know?
Right.
So there's perverse incentives. I mean, AI is an inevitability within the communications industry. So you can either get ahead of it, you can bitch about it, or you can be left behind. They're the two options. You know?
So for illustrators and photographers, I kind of see it as like being back in the Middle Ages when concrete was discovered. You know, stonemasons and people who could carve rock were the rock stars of the Middle Ages, making all those cathedrals and wonderful art, right? And now they're reduced to putting people's names on tombstones.
Right. Well, I mean, you know, like you look at the history of human endeavor. There's always change. I mean, change is an integral part of being the human condition. So. You know, like, I have to be very careful. I'm not an evangelist for AI, and neither am I an apologist. I'm just a very interested observer of, like everybody else. I mean, there's lots of people of my peer group on LinkedIn, God bless them, go on about why tomorrow isn't going to be more like yesterday. Because the glory days for them were back in the 80s and 90s, where they were doing fantastic work, right? And now, like, you know, the rug's been pulled from underneath them, and then they're sort of wandering around like headless chickens, or saying, you know, like, we should go back to craft, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, the thing is, it doesn't fun, like the creative people I know, like, are basically strategic. They're intuitive thinkers, right? like that was replaced by data points, metrics during the digital. Like, we don't need, because you go to the client, right? With, I think this is going to work. I have a gut
Mhm.
feeling that this $1 million you're about to spend on this 60-second commercial is going to be a winner. And God bless the marketing managers, because they've got to go to their board and justify why we spent $1 million
Yeah.
on a 60-second TV commercial, and what are the metrics for that. So when digital came along and said, look, all those likes, like you paid $1 million and you got 3,000 likes and you got all the metrics, you got charts, and the board went, I love you. All of a sudden, I understand what the hell you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Measurability, right? You can see it.
If it doesn't, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That is a materialist ethos philosophy that has pervaded the communication industry now.
Right.
So my generation, which, a wing and a prayer, a gut reaction, just a fit, they were very good at making synthesis between available data points, but just based on intuition.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to put that into a bar chart or
Yes.
you
And
know.
that's
So
very interesting perspective. That makes me think of this whole theory about the difference between little c and big C, where, little c is the everyday creativity when you solve little problems and you use your knife to tighten a screw or what have you, and big C being like high creativity, inventions, art, what have you, but like top end. And from what you're saying, it sounds to me like, and I recognize this from Spotify and from the music industry, is that, okay, like the term you use, good enough, in other words, sort of medium C, has more value in our current market than big C does.
yeah, because it's measurable. Like I'm glad you brought up the music industry, because that comes up on a regular basis. Like I see, it's like a canary in the coal mine for me. What happens in the music industry eventually happens in all the creative industries, and it's undergone a fantastic, or a big rationalization. And we all know something's gone wrong with music. I mean, it's not a generational thing. Like
Yeah.
boomer, go away, like you don't know anything about music. Like my generation, we were really into music, like the whole punk thing, etc.
Yeah.
But it's become automated. It's almost like bots singing bot songs.
Yeah.
And because on Spotify, it's an algorithmic business. Like it just promotes stuff that gets the most clicks or whatever. Like so
Yeah.
how things are evaluated, how creativity is evaluated has changed. So I empathize with creative people who say, well, blah, 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 it's not very good. But how everything is evaluated, not only financially, just how things are, like they make boardroom decisions to increase shareholder value, have fundamentally changed.
Yeah.
So it's not about, you can cry, you can bitch, and you can have a tantrum all over the place. But fundamentally, unless systems are not come back, because we can't go back, but sort of my feeling is when AI comes on board full time, everything becomes automated. Like WPP, which is the biggest ad group in the world, have a business relationship with NVIDIA, which is an AI chip producer.
Wow.
You think
Yeah.
about that. It's like it'll work at scale, because WPP has so many agencies. It'll work at scale where you can literally, because it used to be creativity, now it's content, right? It
Yeah.
used to be creative content. Now they don't even bother. They just call it content, They don't even pretend anymore. So think about it. If you've got this machine that can just like a sausage machine, just automating content, and you're taking your percentages, from your clients off that, and everyone's happy because the metrics are good, or they can be tweaked very easily, et cetera, et cetera. And, but what about all the creative people that are, in this,
Right.
or companies that are 50 or 100 people? Like, it'll only work at scale.
Right.
So, again, like I tend to sort of spin off into other subjects.
Yeah. No, I wanted to pick up on something you said there about, like, the relationship that people like us had with music growing up, and the fact that basically, teenagers today don't have that kind of relationship. And so there's a lot of judgment about generations and preferences and what have you. But if you think about it, commercial popular music kind of sprang into existence in the late 40s, early 50s. We haven't even had it for 100 years. It's
No,
not the way things have to be. And therefore, it's,
exactly.
you know,
Like when you look back, like the 50s, or like the Stones, Beatles, it was an anomaly. It was like
right.
it went from musicians barely earning, a pittance, to being multi-million. Like
Yeah.
yeah, the dynamics change because the metrics to a certain extent change,
Yeah. And now suddenly
and
people expect that.
yeah, and lots of people were making money on the back of.
Right.
And as the same in advertising, like everybody goes laments about like advertising in the Mad Men period, but
Mm.
it only existed because some people outside of the creative circles were earning tons of money supporting these people. While
Right.
they're not, in fact, most agencies, as you probably know, are struggling with their business model now because
Yep.
once media went to separate ways and once agency, it became about a fee basis. Like, how do you cost creative? How do you cost it?
Hmm.
Well, the Nike logo, for example, a lot of people bring that up as an example. I think the graphic designer got originally $400 for doing
Yeah.
the Nike logo. Okay, they rewarded her later. They gave her shares. Now she's a multimillionaire. But you know, so that is the big problem dilemma even for marketing managers: how to cost things effectively. So you know that's why they're almost like, oh, let's just go with content, just stuff. You know,
Yeah.
boom, boom. It's like throwing wet socks at the walls. If something
Yeah.
sticks, we keep doing it. You know, while my generation, we'd sit down, we'd have weeks, we'd work with a strategist, we'd try to identify what the business problem was. The art director, the copywriter sit down and come up with ideas that move the needle forward. It was like an
Yeah.
event for the clients, you know, even though it was difficult to evaluate, et cetera, et cetera. But so I understand why AI is an inevitability in the communication industry because it's got the perverse incentives are built in.
Yeah.
People don't like to complicate their lives, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I also really like the point you just made there about a lot of these models became accepted as the norm because of how many other people outside of those industries were making money.
Yeah.
You know, there's an article in the Guardian this week about novelists who want to give up because they can't make money anymore.
Mhm.
And it's then because they can't get into literary fairs, they can't get column inches in the newspaper. It's like, yeah, because those organizations are making money out of doing what they do. They don't rely on the authors in the same way that they used to. So it's hard to get noticed.
But I think it's like even you know I'm a critic myself in inverted commas. I hate that title, but like we kind of a spoiled generation. You know,
Mm.
it was the first time like after the war, this is an explosion in products. Advertising became very powerful because there was product parity. Like one fridge was no different from the other fridge, so advertising as a brand kicked off in the 50s and 60s, and you know the tail end of that 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? But the dynamics has changed. Like everybody
Mm.
gives out about Musk because he hates advertising, right? Because he is advertising. Putting a Tesla car in orbit is advertising. Going to land on Mars is advertising.
Yeah.
It's about technology as kick. What's interesting? I'm a '60s kid, right? Like a moon landing and Tomorrow's World on BBC. Like, and it was fantastic. I was really into science, right? And then something happened. Reaganomics, Thatcherism, it changed the dynamics of the world, the Western world, back to financialization, making money out of money,
Mm.
and that's the kick that we were seeing the ramifications of that. And then we got the technologists, i.e., the Valley people, so Valley coming back, and they push the agenda forward based on innovation. So it's not one fridge is exactly like the other fridge. It's like this fridge is 100 times better than that fridge. So advertising as a brand mechanism loses its not it doesn't lose its reason to be. It loses that sort of fundamental why people invested so much money in
Yeah.
branding. You know?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I'm working it out myself on my own head.
No, it kind of does. And again, we're talking about a similar thing here, aren't we? We're talking about the substitution of models and the value that the group of people assigns to the model rather than the inherent value of the thing itself.
Yeah, yeah. If I understand you correctly, it's look. The thing is, like that, we could have a big debate about the system rewards financial rewards because shareholders, to a
Yeah.
certain extent, are in control now. Like maybe in Germany, you still got the traditional sort of family companies where, you know, even Volkswagen, Porsche, and all those kind of people, to a certain extent, they're still, I think they're still on the board. But do you understand? So the dynamics has changed. So
Yeah.
even WPP, like, joining forces with an AI chip company makes perfect sense
Yeah.
for shareholders. For creative people who are about to lose their job, it's horrible.
Yeah.
So you get this polarization debate again about you. But the thing is, I'm not an evangelist, Ray. I'm not an apologist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Creative, genuine creative people that have something interesting to say have nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
but if you're in the industry because you're automats, like you're a whiz on the Adobe software. So,
Yeah.
and there were lots of people like that. Like for the art directors like me, all got chucked out because like they pulled in the Adobe designers, right? The
Mm.
copywriters did okay for the last 10, 15 years because there was so much demand for content.
Yeah.
But now you can see all of a sudden, like the copywriters on LinkedIn going, because their
Yeah.
livelihoods are under threat. So I'm not gloating. It's just this is what's going on.
It's inevitable. All right. So this carries on for the next 20 years until pretty much AI generated, let's just call it content, to use the buzzword, whether it's music, art, copy, design, is now ubiquitous.
Mhm.
Does that then create the circumstances where actual hand human made art suddenly becomes incredibly valued because of its difference to that?
Bingo. And I wrote about this on my Twitter feed last year. And a lot of people didn't accept what I was saying. I said the good news for creative people is because everything like money people want to buy exclusivity.
Yeah.
That's what they buy. They want access and exclusivity, right? So if everything is this tsunami of sameness, the bots talking to bot, they call it about the dead internet at the moment, is that
Yeah.
there's no point in going in there because it's just bots talking to bot algorithms. So and you could feel that I'm kind of sort of weaning myself off social media as well because you can realize like you
Yeah.
anyway, that's another subject for another day. To answer your question, I think it's really good news for creative people, and I know a lot of creative people don't accept this, is that the value of being able what creative people are very good at doing, they take two objects that seem not related and make a synthesis. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And they create surprise like that. It says, oh, I didn't
Yeah.
know that had anything to do with that. AI can do that, but it's limited at the moment. I mean, and curation is a great part of being a creative, is that 90% of creativity is choosing something.
Hmm.
Because you give 10 images in front of you, creative eye, experience, whatever you want to call it, intuition, to go, that one.
Yeah.
A lot of clients will think they're on AI now and they're trying to, but they can do it. But what they're failing to understand is the creative process is about identifying what is good.
Yeah. Not what is wrong.
Because does that make any sense? Because I use ChatGPT all the time, but not to write anything. I just it uses a word or a thought or phrase, and I go,
Yeah.
I never thought about that. So it's like a creative partner, right? And then you
Yeah.
put that out and you use that.
Yeah.
So, but the thinking is that like, it's the end of the world. It'll all be automated with no jobs for creative people. I think actually their star will rise again. And I'm talking about genuine creative people because there's lots of people out there call themselves creative, but they're not. They're operators, they're machine operators. So anything that has become automated, especially in the digital world, they're like the paradox being is that you remember the Zuckerberg said like move fast and break things.
Yeah.
Who's the generation is going to that generation?
Yeah.
Because they adopted it wholesale without developing on the skills. They thought this is the future. Anything that happened before 1995 didn't exist. History stopped.
Yeah.
So So like, that's why I'm actually quite an optimistic viewpoint on AI in terms of creativity, because creativity is part of the human experience. Like you can't stop somebody being creative. You can
Yeah.
pick a pencil and, as I say, draw like Da Vinci or those like badly drawn stickmen. It's such a wide.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. I
so
mean, I
I know possibly I went off on too much of a philosophical rant there, but
that's kind of the point of these conversations. So,
I,
if the one of the big values of human creativity is this element of surprise, where we combine things that nobody's thought of putting together, is that something that can be replicated? Because, of course, if your large language model gets big enough, surely it's going to start doing that as well.
Well, this is why AI is very, very interesting for me because if you go upstream, start listening to people who are at the cutting edge. Right? The thing is, at the beginning, I called AI the mimic machine, or even more derogatory, I call it the karaoke machine.
Yeah.
Give the impression that you're a rock star, and the early iterations of AI, which is like only 2 years ago, kind of did that. It was a karaoke machine because it instantaneously made you look like a rock star, you know.
Yeah.
But it is essentially just matching data. There's no intuition yet. But that's what's interesting about AI, because if they want to go into the sentient AGI area, like there's all kinds of debate around that, because there's a bit of a paradox. Like they talk about safety, which is basically making sure that there's no AI systems out there that haven't been trained for clearly defined ideologies, right? Like
Right.
wokeism would be a good example. You build that into the neural networks, right? But if you really want to go to sentience and conscious, it has to have autonomous agency, which is subjectivity.
Yeah.
So unless AI is allowed to be subjective, it can never compete with humans.
Wow.
The-
And we
the-
don't want that, do we?
but this is the sort of existential dread in people, is somehow,
Right.
I even use the word misanthropic. Like its ultimate aim is to replace people, right?
Mm.
But human beings are. I think we beat ourselves up on a regular basis without really clapping ourselves on the back now and again. Like the abilities of the human being far surpass any technology out there at the moment.
Sean, thank you so
Uh,
much for sharing your input and your perspective with us on the show today. As it is, it's been extremely enlightening listening to you. And to anybody listening to this episode, please just check out Sean's links in the show notes underneath the episode, so you can chase him down that rabbit hole as well at another date. Sean, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and hopefully it works out for you. Thank you very much, Ed.
Thank you.